Hello everybody, welcome to the 6.4 tester commentary for Bloons Card Storm. 6.4 is here, and if you've heard about Card Storm news recently, you might have heard that the game was cancelled, and although that's true for major updates, this was an update made by the community mainly, just as a balance change thing. A special thing about this update is that adventures are now free. Adventures are very good ways to get progress in the game. They have a lot of rewards to them. They're also just a lot of fun in general. So if you haven't played Amelia's Adventure or Striker's Adventure yet, I would highly recommend checking that out because now they're free. You don't have to pay for them at all. This is the biggest balance list we have ever had in Bloons Card Storm. One of the biggest patches, I think, in Ninja Kiwi history. I genuinely can't think of a patch, even in any other game, that is as big as this one, in terms of the sheer amount of changes. So we hope you enjoy. This is an update made out of a lot of care for Bloons Card Storm, and it was made by the community primarily. So, here we go. Start off with the Bloons. Bloons have 51 total changes to them, and the first thing that I'd like to mention is that there are a lot of Bloons that had the exact same change. All of these Bloons had plus 10 health, all 13 of these guys. So all of the blues got buffed by plus 10 because every single blue was pretty weak. They just were slow, and you actually had to pay money for them, which made them a lot worse than red in practically every situation. So all of them got plus 10 health to make them a little bit more viable. Specifically for Camo Blue, it's a pretty big deal. Camo Blue at 100 makes it a lot stronger, and it makes it stronger than something like a green, so you have more of a potential reward if it hits. Double red, double blue, double green, and double ceramic all got buffed. Because the doubles are just so weak in terms of health, and they didn't even do more damage than their counterparts. Like double red at 40 health dealt less damage than just a normal green. And of course, like, you're supposed to use the health buffers to make it do more damage, but the fact that double Bloons did less damage was always kind of strange. Double green is 90, double blue is 70 if I remember. I forget. I haven't used double blue in forever. And then double ceramic is now 230, which definitely helps with its viability in general, because for a long time double ceramic has just kind of been worse double yellow. Specifically for infinite storm spawn during tournaments, that matters quite a lot because double ceramic comes in waves of 4 every single wave. Having them be a little bit stronger closes out games quicker. Camo Green is also a little stronger. Camo Green, initially we did not put it at 140 because we tested at 140 last balance update, and we thought, oh, maybe it's a bit too strong. But after looking at Camo Green's viability post 6.2, it doesn't seem to be doing quite the hottest, so it's now 140, making it stronger than a yellow. Lead is 150, which makes it generally easier to do higher damage and makes it survive a little bit better. White is now 110, so that it can kind of compete against black a little more, since black has generally outclassed it. And gold and blue now has plus 10 health, so it has 80 health. Doesn't really change that many interactions for gold and blue specifically, but what it does do is make it a little bit more resilient and makes it survive maybe one more hit and get you one more gold. Zombie Blue Bloon has had its charges increased from 1 to 2. The thing about Zombie Blue is that it was a one-charge Bloon that just didn't really do much in a deck compared to something like Undead Army, and now it does a little more in comparison to Undead Army, because unlike Undead, it does not brick your hand as hard if you don't want to play a bunch of Zombie Blues. Undead Army is a bit tricky to play sometimes because clogging your board with 4 Zombie Blues when you have stronger things in your hand can sometimes be bad, and Zombie Blue is now potentially a way to get around that by just having 2 charges instead of your hand instead of 4. Clever Lead has had its Clever Armor bonus increase from 10 to 20. This makes it generally a little more resilient. It lets it survive things like Alchemist Puddle with taking no damage, generally reduces chip damage from some higher damage stuff. Makes it a little better against, if it's buffed, it makes it better against stronger targets. Makes Clever Lead a little easier to actually take advantage of the huge amount of armor it has now, because now, with the Clever bonus, it has 30 armor instead of 20, which is quite a lot. Taunting Bloon has had its health increased from 20 to 40 and its delay reduced from 2 to 1. Taunting Bloon beforehand was a frankly awful Bloon. It had low stats, it had a higher delay than most Bloons, and it also costed 2. The only thing about it that was good was its must pop, and even then, it really didn't matter all that much. But now with the extra health and reduced delay, it can potentially be a little bit better at doing both of those things, but it still might be a little too weak to properly see use. But a little better now. The Eternal's health boost has been increased from 30 to 60. Now, the reason why this matters so much, and the reason why we buffed Eternal at all, is because Eternal has been scaling so slow. The thing about Eternal is, on leak, sure, it got that plus 60, which is lower than it was before the nerf, but the big thing about Eternal is that if you popped it, it got plus 30, which was just nothing. It was just such a low amount of health. If you kept popping Eternal, it could pretty much never scale. Like, there was no way that it would scale to a point where your opponent actually had to really worry about it before, well, it's already, like, the game's already over by the time it's even in a somewhat threatening state. And even then, that's not accounting for the fact that Return to Sender gets rid of it, Blue Master Alchemist gets rid of it. It's just, like, it's such a difficult card to pull off, and the plus 30 was especially bad. So its scaling has been increased to plus 60 on both on-pop and on-leak, to potentially make it a little less of a chore to scale. The issues with Eternal go far past the actual scaling part of it, though, so this is a nice buff for it. Hopefully it'll see a little bit more use. Nested Green's health has been increased from 80 to 100. As you saw earlier, Nested Blue also got a plus 10 health boost, so now we're at plus 30 for Nested Green, pretty much. And it's just an overall nice buff that makes Nested Green just a bit more threatening and a bit more of an actual, like, tank. Now Nested Green has 200 health with it has 200 health just in general, so it's a little bit better for camo tanking. Swarm Green Bloon got plus 5, making it generally better in aggro and especially in Azalea, who tends to like running Swarm Bloons more than anything. Setup Bloon has had a rework. Its cost has been increased from 2 to 3, but its discount has been increased from 1 to 2. This is an overall pretty massive buff to Setup. Before, Setup really did not get you that much value. Even hitting just a 2-charge Bloon didn't get you value because you would save 2, but you would also spend 2. Nowadays, if you use Discount Bloon and hit a 2-charge Bloon, you'll get a +1, you'll get like -1 cost overall on the thing. On Swarm Bloons, it's a much bigger discount. Before it was, like if you hit a 3-charge Bloon with Setup, you would get -1 cost for 2 costs. So you would save 3 for 2. But with this new rework, you would spend 3 to save 6, which is a much bigger discount. Setup is generally kind of like For My Next Trick in that department, but it's a little bit more reliable, can be used by any hero, and it generally is pretty dang good with some Bloons. I'd recommend trying it out with stuff like Swarm Yellows or the new Discount Bloon, which we'll talk about a little later. Aura of Strength Bloon has had its health increased from 100 to 120, making it a little better to survive and making it a little easier to buff other things. This Bloon has generally been outclassed by Strengthenator even since its launch, but now they have the same stats, and now Aura of Strength Bloon at least has a bit better of a chance of surviving against the enemy's attacks. Bloontonium Gas Bloon has had its health increase from 160 to 190. A plus 30 health buff is a pretty big one, but this Bloon is so slow to the point where it doesn't really matter all that much, but it is much more consistent now, and it is more threatening if you don't deal with it. So hopefully this can make Bloontonium Gas Bloon see use on a couple heroes. Fortified Regrow Camo Red Bloon has had its health increase from 90 to 110. I'm so sorry for breaking the consistency where 90 health is a Fortified Red Bloon, but this Bloon was just a little too weak. Its low health made it really easy to pop in one turn, and this just makes it a little bit more hardy, a bit better to survive, makes it able to take advantage of its huge regrow a little more. So, thanks Fortified Camo Regrow Red Bloon. Fun interaction, by the way, is that it doesn't die to Ninja anymore, but it does die to Night Vision Sniper, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Extra Shot Bloon has had a rework. Its cost has been increased from 3 to 5, but its charges have been increased from 1 to 2. I need to talk about this for a little bit because 3-cost extra shot balloon on its own is not a big problem, but with 2 charges, it becomes an incredibly strong defensive balloon that can take out pretty much anything. Think about it like this. An extra shot balloon is pretty much 90 damage for like sniper or like super, that kind of thing. You use like night vision, it's with the better stats 110, which is a lot. And extra shot balloon making you more Bloontonium in its own right is kind of a benefit. At 5 cost 2 charges, this became a balloon that ZJ in particular liked to use quite a lot. Adora would use it on occasion, like Azili might use it, Striker Jones uses it sometimes, Oben uses it. It's a balloon with a lot more flexibility because it is a bit of offensive pressure with its quick delay and decent amount of health, but it also is a good defensive card because it immediately helps you defend while also building you a lot of Bloontonium, which makes Extra Shot a much more viable and interesting supportive balloon than what it was before. Regrow Yellow Balloon has its charges increased from 2 to 1, but its health has been increased from 130 to 160. Although we buffed its health in the past, we've come to realize that Regrow Yellow Balloon is a lot better with if it's just like one big balloon, and that's mainly because Regrow doesn't really work as well with lower health balloons. Regrow Yellow now has a much bigger health pool to take advantage of, and it's a lot harder to kill it in one turn. It generally is also a lot more threatening if you let it sit there and leak, because instead of 130, it's going all the way to 160. This change actually turned out quite strong in testing. It was initially 130 to 170, but the problem is 170 was actually way too good. It basically became a volatile balloon with no downside. So we reduced the health to 160 in testing to make it a little easier to survive. And Regrow Yellow still felt like a very strong and good card, so I'd recommend trying it out in aggro decks when you get this in your hands. Stun Gas Balloon has had its health increase from 100 to 120. The effect is pretty strong if you can proc it, but the only issue is that it just had such low health that it was really non-threatening with the 2 delay. Now it's a little bit easier to get a bit more value out of Stun Gas Balloon. Buddy Balloon has had its health increase from 75 to 100 to make it a little more tanky to have the effect last for longer. Damage Moab has a little bit less health lost on play, which basically makes it just a bit stronger, 375 instead of 350. Generally, Damage Moab was not a horrible card beforehand, but it just was a little underwhelming compared to the other options early. So Damage Moab has had a little bit more health to make it a bit more attractive to use for those early tempo decks. Defense Prep Balloon has had its health increase from 100 to 130 and its delay decreased from 3 to 4. This makes it last on the field for longer so you can use its effect more, and its increased health makes it a little bit more hard to pop. This balloon generally is a little bit hard to fix entirely because its effect is random, but the amount of health and delay that it has will hopefully make it a little bit better by allowing it to sit on the field for longer and proc its effect a little more. Extractor Balloon has had its delay reduced from 4 to 3. Extractor Balloon, although it wants to scale, had just such high delay that it really was basically a non-threat. With a lower delay, Extractor Balloon is a little easier to extract the health out of your enemy's balloons and then actually hit your opponent with or get off a decent extractor instead of an extractor that does nothing because they could afford one extra turn. So it's a little bit easier to use now, and it is generally a bit more threatening. Nested Yellow has had its health increase from 120 to 140. Again, all the Nesteds have had their health increased, which makes Nested Yellow a much stronger tank for camo balloons. Rapid Shield has been increased from 50 to 70. This is a big shield buff, and you might be wondering why Rapid even needed the buff. Rapid was a really good balloon if it could get its effect off. Its effect is incredibly powerful for 4. The issue is that this balloon was not terribly strong, and more so, it was such a massive threat that your opponent would immediately, hard target it. So, 150 health, 50 shield was 200 health beforehand, 200 health. With this buff, it's now 220, which makes it a little bit easier to survive a couple things it couldn't before. It can survive stuff like 2 sniper shots and a dart monkey, and more importantly, with a nerf coming later on, it can survive Bionic Boomerang, which allows Rapid to be a little bit more tanky and survive more stuff, generally letting it get a proc or two off before it dies a little easier now, which helps because this Bloon often would just die without doing anything beforehand. Shield Gas Bloon's health has been increased by 30 and its shield gain has been increased by 5. The shield gain is just to make it slightly better and the health increase is just to make it a little bit more tanky. It's still probably not that good. Zombie Rainbow Bloon has had a rework. Its cost has been increased from 4 to 5, but its delay has been reduced from 5 to 4. Zombie Rainbow Bloon was just a really slow, and having a slow Bloon in a zombie deck, although it makes sense, isn't exactly the greatest against a matchup like aggro, where you want to kill them as fast as possible. With this new 5 cost, it means that Zombie Rainbow Bloon can hit the opponent much faster, and specifically on Azili, 5 cost means that playing this Bloon will immediately get you a totem without needing to play any other Bloon, making it generally a lot more effective in zombie decks. Armor Power Bloon mainly got buffs from the amount of armored cards that got buffed, but it did get a buff in its own right. It got its health increased from 80 to 100 to make it slightly more survivable if you only have a couple armored cards and you need to play Armor Power Bloon early. Ceramic Bloon is a big one. Its health has been increased from 250 to 270. Ceramic as its own card has been bad for a very long time. Its stats were just a little bit too low to ever really justify running in a deck, and this health increase should hopefully make the card itself a little bit better. Now, as a consequence, the Storm is a little stronger now, but many monkeys have been buffed to try and deal with the Storm as well. Discount Bloon has gotten a significant rework. Its cost has been increased from 5 to 7, and its health has been increased from 120 to 220. This generally makes Discount fulfill a new role, that role being a Swarm Ceramic. Its huge health pool now allows the cost to really matter. With its old stats, even if you got like a pretty low Discount Bloon cost, it still wasn't really that strong because 120 on 2 was just a pretty bad stat line all around, so even in those low costs, it really didn't matter all that much. 220, though, is a much better stat line. Although you're paying more initially for it, it also has like a lot more of like an actual effect on the game immediately when you play it, and it doesn't take that long to become pretty solid. At 5 cost, you're getting a slightly weaker Ceramic, but at 4 or less, you're getting a actual pretty dang good deal. Not to mention that these are a lot more tanky against stuff like Super Monkey Storm, which you can use stuff like Prince of Darkness, Maelstrom, all that kind of stuff. That generally helps a Discount work better as an actual tempo tool instead of being this kind of weird gimmicky thing. Its gimmick's still intact, by the way. You still can discount other discounts in your hand by playing a Discount Bloon, which makes drawing multiple discounts an incredibly powerful play that can overwhelm your opponents very easily if you get that. Discount Bloon is an incredibly fun Bloon with this rework, and I highly encourage you to put in some tempo decks and try it out. Double Lead Bloon's health has been increased from 130 to 140, and its armor increased from 10 to 20. There are 2 lead Bloons on this because it's a double lead, so why not double the armor? And a health boost to also help with that. This generally makes double lead a lot easier to actually hit and deal damage with, and it makes it less of the laughingstock out of the doubles. Draining Bloon's health has been increased from 200 to 220 to make the reward for hitting it generally a little better. Growth Gas Bloon's delay has been reduced from 5 to 3. Growth Gas Bloon, although a decent card for Quincy specifically, really suffered from being incredibly slow for no real reason. Now at 3 delay, it's a lot less easy to ignore a Growth Gas Bloon if it has health still remaining on it, while not really like hurting the interactions with Quincy where he would use Growth Gas to buff up his own stuff. You still have enough time to do that, it's just not so slow it'll never hit the opponent. Lead Coating Bloon has had a major rework. Its health has been increased from 80 to 130, but its armor has been decreased from 30 to 20. The high amount of armor was annoying for casual players, but the low amount of health was really bad for competitive players. So this rework aims to make this card a lot less annoying, but a little stronger by having a huge health increase offset by the decreased amount of armor. Now it's a lot easier to chip this thing down for casual players, and it's a lot harder to actually ignore this thing for competitive players due to it having a much more significant amount of health if ignored. Hastening Bloon also has a rework. Its delay was reduced from 2 to 1, and its health was reduced from 150 to 120. The reason why the delay reduction happened is because it makes running multiple hastenings in a deck easier. A thing that would happen with hastening is if you ran multiple, you'd have to play one, and then if you wanted to play another one, you'd have to wait 2 turns before you could actually do that, because there would be a chance that the hastening could hit the 1 delay hastening bloon. Now with 1 delay, it means that you can play a hastening bloon, skip one, pass 1 turn, and then it's on 0 delay, meaning that your second hastening can no longer hit that hastening bloon. Just makes it overall a little easier to use hastening alongside itself, and makes it less of a chore to run multiple copies of hastening. Weakening Gas Bloon has had its health increase from 300 to 400. Although the effect is annoying, its low amount of health made this thing not really that easy to, actually get any value out of, and although its effect, again, is annoying, it really wasn't that strong of an effect to warrant such a low amount of stats, especially compared to Moab, which is the same cost as it, but also has a second charge, and had over 200 health, higher than it. Now it only has 100 more health, making it Weakening Gas maybe a little bit better to see use on its own. Camo Regrow Rainbow Bloon was again just still too expensive. Its cost has been decreased from 7 to 6 to not do anything to Camo Regrow Rainbow Rush of Death, while also making the card itself a little easier to run. Its low cost now makes it a lot easier for Tempo to run this as a kind of sticky, can't really deal with this kind of bloon. So I'd encourage trying it with other Camo Bloons like Golden Blimp, Soul Stealer, BFB, and new ZOMG. Camo Regrow Ceramic Bloon now has a delay reduction from 3 to 2. Although the whole idea behind Camo Regrow Ceramic versus Rainbow was that one had 2 charges and the other had 1 charge but stronger stats, the stats of Camo Regrow Rainbow Ceramic would just never really make it worth it. So now a delay reduction is in effect to basically make it a lot easier to immediately pressure your opponent with this bloon compared to Camo Regrow Rainbow, which although cheaper and although still pretty good, it's a lot slower, heals a little less, and has a bit less health. Now Camo Regrow Ceramic Bloon now has more of a competition against Camo Regrow Rainbow. Zebra Bloon is hard to explain, so I'm going to try. Its cost has been increased from 7 to 8, and its health has been decreased from 180 to 150. Now, this is labeled as a rework, which sounds really strange. Why is it a rework? The thing about Zebra Bloon is that 8 cost is a huge buff for it in terms of Bloontonium gain and the basic structure of it, being a really good support bloon for Control. Control loves having high Bloontonium generation, high card draw cards that make huge value in one deck slot. You might be saying, well, why does it have to be 8 cost for this? 7 cost, it means it's even cheaper, and cheaper is better, right? Well, not really with Zebra. The thing about these cards is that because they're so expensive already, 7 is not cheap by any means for a card like this. 7 is still expensive for a card like Zebra. The higher cost doesn't really matter as much in comparison to what 8 Bloontonium actually gives you. 8 Bloontonium gives you stuff like Oban Shield in 1 bloon. 8 Bloontonium gives you stuff like Mountain Oban Dire Wolves with 2 black bloons or 2 extra shot bloons for a clean 18. That also applies to Gwen. 2 Zebra Bloons at 8 give you a sacrifice with Adora without having to run another card that actually gives you Bloontonium. Because it was 7, this would only give you 14. All these Bloontonium interactions are very powerful and make Zebra Bloon a lot better, even though on paper, this looks like a really harsh and flat nerf. It was so good, in fact, that in testing, this did not get the health decrease at first. But it would just completely outclass every single other card draw option in the entire game for these late game heroes. There was pretty much no reason to run Black Bloon or White Bloon or any other card draw when you could just run Zebra for all the Bloontonium you've ever need with this incredible card draw. So its health was reduced from 180 to 150 to make it less good at pressuring the opponent. Now Black Bloons, although they draw a little less hard and they don't give you as much Bloontonium, they still pressure the opponent more than something like Zebra does with its 150 health. And if you've played this game since launch, Zebra's stats actually mirror the exact same stats they had at launch, which is kind of a funny coincidence. If you have more questions about why Zebra is good, I would totally be fine with answering them in the comments or in a Reddit post or whatever, because Zebra's rework is just incredibly difficult to describe why it's such a big deal, but in practice for the competitive scene at least, it is a very clear difference about how good Zebra was before and after 8 cost. So, Zebra has gotten nerfed, and by nerfed, I mean buffed. Rainbow Bloon has had its health increase from 400 to 440. Rainbow Bloon is a fun bloon, being a pretty high-cost 3-delay bloon, but it just had a little too low health. 40 extra health on both the charges should make it a little easier to hit the opponent and to make them generally a little bit more pressured overall. Soul Stealer Bloon has had its health decrease from 600 to 570. This effectively means that in total it gets one less, one less soul stealing, I guess. This bloon was incredibly powerful with a type of deck called High Roll, where you would try and get stuff like economy drains to get your opponent to have basically no money, steal their bloons with Soul Stealer Bloon, or steal your own bloons with Soul Stealer Bloon, and then use this huge bloon to convert and then kill them off of it. Because it was really strong at that and was probably overall the best blimp in the game, Soul Stealer Bloon has had its health slightly decreased to make it a little bit harder to get to as insane of values as it had. Double Rainbow Bloon has had its health increase from 330 to 400. Yes, a plus 70 change is a lot, but Double Rainbow Bloon was bad enough to justify this. As a 10-cost bloon, it is an extremely expensive investment, and it just did not give you the amount of health that you wanted out of a 10-cost bloon. In the Storm, these bloons were also not that scary, and nowadays with 400 health, it's a lot more worrying and actually a threat to deal with Double Rainbow Bloons in those Storms and in other decks. Double Rainbow just was not strong enough before this health boost, and a 9-cost was considered, but overall, the better power of Double Rainbows generally suited them better as a card than a slower cost with a little bit better stats, maybe? I don't know. Double Rainbow's better. ZOMG has had its cost reduced from 10 to 8. This is a significant cost reduction, but ZOMG has been outclassed by a lot of things recently. Mainly Led Zeppelin, Soul Stealer Bloon, Golden Blimp, BFB. Those kind of bloons always just kind of outclass ZOMG, especially because it was a one-charge, pretty expensive bloon. And ZOMG, because of that, has had its cost reduced from 10 to 8. Although second charge maybe could have been considered with a health nerf, this would have affected the Storm pretty significantly, and more importantly, ZOMG at an 8 cost is a much more unique bloon. Sure, it has a, it's still 5 delay, right? But with this lower cost and huge stat line, it means that ZOMG is one of the most efficient options in the game for getting stats on the board as soon as you can. 8 cost makes it usually have more health than something like Soul Stealer and significantly more health than something like BFB or Golden Blimp, while making it a little cheaper to use. ZOMG overall is a pretty good card now, and it's pretty strong in tempo. DDT has had its armor increase from 20 to 25. Makes DDT a little bit better at surviving chip damage, defenders, and other things like that that generally kind of wore it down before it hit the opponent. And that is all of the changes for the bloons. Next we're going to go on to the monkeys with 40 total changes for them. All these monkeys have gotten plus 5 damage changes. Dart Monkey is a little bit better at defending early, Distraction is a bit better at defending, Missile Launcher is a bit better, Wizard scales a little bit better now that it has 30 attack. Miner just had such low damage to where it was very rare to ever actually want to run a little mini Miner instead of anything else. Elite Defender just did a little bit too little damage, so it now can defend stuff easier, doing 220 damage in burst instead of 200. Sharpshooter now has a bit better damage. I think it's 90 damage per turn now, making it a little bit more of a competitive choice versus something like Super Monkey. Extra range tack shooter now has some pretty cool new interactions. With no 0 gold, it now pops a green in 1 defender round, and with 0 gold, it all the way pops a yellow now, which is pretty dang good for anti-aggro. And then AMD got a little bit of a damage buff just to make it a little bit more better to use. Mortar Monkey's cost has been decreased from 2 to 1. Mortar was supposed to be a powerhouse in the early game, having random targeting being a massive downside in exchange for being able to do more damage than most other options. While at launch that was pretty true, nowadays not really at all. In fact, stuff like Barrel not only has the exact same damage per turn, but lets you target stuff, and you get 2 extra Dart Monkeys out of it. Twins does more damage. Mortar's cost at 2 was just really holding it back, and although a damage buff could have maybe done something, it felt better to create Mortar like a better place to really exist in the game by being a 1 cost. This makes him overall a lot better in stuff like Jones. With Striker Jones, this is now the only military monkey in the entire game that's a 1 cost, meaning that he is better for foddering out, or like as War Bonds fodder. Which makes Mortar Monkey generally a lot better in those kinds of decks, and also makes him, again, probably the best damage per turn you can get at 1 cost now, because with 1 cost, there's not really that much stuff that does as much damage as Mortar. Lead Coating Factory has had its cost reduced from 2 to 1. Lead Coating Factory had to fight against Ceramic Coating Factory, and it was just a really difficult battle. But Lead Coating Factory also had to deal with mass lead production, a power which gave everything 15 armor. And because of that, Lead Coating Factory is just a little bit difficult to make work very well. So its cost has been reduced from 2 to 1 to make it more viable in aggro decks as a way to protect your early Bloons. And this might make it a little bit easier to protect stuff like Bloomings or other important Bloons. Maybe give it to a Lead Bloon for some crazy armor that like bounces the attacks of Barrel of Monkeys right off of it with 20 armor. Ceramic Glazing Kiln has had its ammo reduced from 5 to 4, but its health bonus has been increased from 20 to 25. This generally means that it gives you slightly more health, 100 instead of 90, but, oh wait, no, not 100 instead of 90, it's 100 for each. But it makes it better because overall the amount of health that it gives you comes out faster, and it makes it easier to give, like, a specific Bloon you want to protect just a little bit more health instead of it being spread across so many Bloons to where it feels like it's not as big of a deal. Leeching Shot Sniper has had its damage increased from 50 to 60. Leeching Shot, although it has a pretty decent on-attack effect, just did very little damage, only doing 25 damage per turn for 2, which was just an incredibly low amount. Its damage has been increased to make it a little easier to survive early with Leeching Shot Sniper if played early. Quincy Action Figure has had its cost decreased from 2 to 3, or not decreased, increased. Quincy Action Figure has been a staple in OTK, and even in stuff like Tempo decks has been incredibly strong due to its ability to make you a ton of money instantly. And it was just such a powerful effect for 2 that it felt like a cost increase was a bit necessary to make sure that Quincy Action Figure wasn't too easy to get down and then immediately replace on every turn, without spending basically any money at all. Tack Shooter's Defender bonus has been increased from plus 10 to plus 15. This is to make it generally a little better than something like Ninja, who came out and kind of destroyed Tack's role as an early game defender by also being a 2-cost defender with better overall burst damage. Tack Shooter individually now has a lot better stats than a Ninja, but Ninjas are still probably a little better. It just makes Tack Shooter overall a bit easier to live with and makes it less of a laughingstock in comparison. Banana Plantation has had its cost reduced from 3 to 2. A thing with this patch is that we could not do, how do I put this? We could not do reworks as much as we wanted to. So Banana Plantation, instead of getting a major rework, has just had its cost decreased to make it a little bit better in earlier aggro decks. In testing, it still felt kind of weak, but it didn't feel awful anymore, and Banana Plantation could potentially see use versus aggro decks that run a lot of card draw by giving you a lot of money. Boomerang Monkey's cost has been reduced from 3 to 2. Boomer's extra damage that it got last update was pretty good, but still was nowhere near enough to save it at 3 cost, and it's just so high of a cost for it that bringing the cost down made sense. Notably, this means that Boomerang Monkey actually has the same kind of dynamic that Bomb has with Bomb Bloon now, where a Rang Bloon and Boomerang only cost 3 instead of before where it would cost 4. Out of a Rang Bloon, Boomerang Monkey gives you 50 damage per turn, whereas Bomb gives you 26.6, meaning that you'll have to choose now between Rang Bloon or Bomb Bloon for either higher burst damage or better damage per turn. He generally feels overall a lot better to use in that use case, even though Bomb Bloon, in our opinion, still is a better card. Bloontonium Saboteur's Bloontonium Lost has been increased from 4 to 6. This generally makes it a little easier to get rid of opponents' abilities and make them have a bit more of a deficit in terms of affording their abilities, making it a little easier to use. Heart of Vengeance Druid has gotten its 3rd ammo back from when it was a 5 cost. This card was just so weak and its effect is so difficult to make work that its insane amount of damage per scaling, or damage if it actually does scale, it feels like a very worthwhile thing to get with 3 ammo at a 3 cost. Crossbow Monkey has received a major rework. Its ammo has been increased from 2 to 3, but its damage has been decreased from 50 to 35. This generally means that Crossbow does like 5 more damage than he used to, but he does not do as much damage as Night Vision Sniper, who also got buffed in this update. The real big deal with Crossbow Monkey this update is now that he has 3 ammo and 2 reload, he's much better with buffing. This means that cards like Village and Gwen's Heated Up are much better on Crossbow Monkey, so much so to the point where it is quite strong. Crossbow Monkey with Village does a huge amount of damage per turn, somewhere in the 80s. Which makes Crossbow overall an actual pretty solid option if you're running buffing towers, and makes it a generally much better card. Night Vision Sniper has had its damage increased from 100 to 110. Although 100 damage was decent, it still wasn't enough to really totally justify running Night Vision Sniper, but with 110 damage per turn, it now is a lot easier to justify Night Vision Sniper with a solid 55 damage per turn, doing a lot of burst damage instantly, and generally being a pretty solid monkey being able to ignore camo balloons. Druid's heal has been increased from 75 to 100. This makes Druid a lot better by giving it one really major thing over other defenders, its burst. Druid's initial burst now is 170, 100 heals with 70 burst damage from the defender. This makes Druid even stronger, have an even stronger burst than Tack Sprayer for the same cost, making it a little easier to use in decks and heroes that generally tend to lose a bit more health than others. Using Druid in something like Gwendolyn is a lot better now, since not only do you get basically what is a free tack shooter, but you still get to heal 100 health for 4. Mine Supervisor. His damage has been increased from 40 to 50. The reason why miners are bad is mainly just due to the fact that they are really easy to rush down early and they don't actually put on that much pressure. Although a lot of casuals may hate this change, the reason why we did this is because nowadays there's just so many high health threats to the point where Mine Supervisor really feels like he's falling behind even in the area of the game where it feels like he should be building up to. If you're having trouble with Mine Supervisor and dying to him a lot, I recommend running high health balloons that are really easy to destroy the opponents in basically one big go, instead of a lot more cheaper balloons that deal less damage. Or if you're playing aggro, if you see someone play a Mine Supervisor or Miner, rush them immediately, and generally it might turn out a lot better. But Mine Supervisor has a bit better damage to make miners just a little easier to use instead of making them so difficult to actually get any value out of. Spike-a-Bolt's damage has been increased from 50 to 60. This generally makes it a little easier to pop balloons and a little easier to scale, while also improving it in Azili. Cast Drop Sniper's damage has been increased from 65 to 80. Although its farming is less efficient than farm, having a tower that could do both damage and also give you money is a pretty good idea. The problem was its damage was just so low to the point where it's like, why would you ever use this? But now Cast Drop has a lot better damage, making it a little easier to justify running it in decks like Azili's or, what is his name, Striker Jones. Those two are pretty much the only two heroes that would still consider running Cast Drop Sniper, but at least it has somewhat of a niche in those decks now. Druid of Peace has had its cost increase from 5 to 7. I know casuals don't really use this guy and may not understand why this guy is so strong, but holy shit, this guy is powerful in terms of competitive play and has completely dominated the game at 5 cost. He's pretty much in every single deck that wants to deal with any sort of OTK or control, and his effect over the game is insanely dominant for a tower that doesn't cost that much. Compared to cards like Corvus Academy of Arts, his cost was just so low, and he had such a much stronger effect. His effect arguably was stronger than Corvus Academy of Arts, and he was like way cheaper. So his cost has been increased from 5 to 7 to make him a little bit more difficult to use and maybe encourage people to run stuff like Corvus Academy of Arts a little bit more. Radar Scanner Village has had a major rework. Its cost has been increased from 5 to 7, but its damage bonus has been increased from plus 10 to plus 35. This makes Radar Scanner Village an actually really good buffing tool, because now it can give monkeys extreme attack bonuses that allow them to do massive damage. This makes Radar Scanner overall less of a laughingstock, and generally lets it work better with stuff like crossbow, frag bombs, sharpshooter, those kind of monkeys. while the Fire Monkey has had its defender bonus increased from +5 to +30. Due to the very low amount of reworks we could fit in here, Fall of Fire did not get a different rework that might have made it better, so its defender bonus was just increased massively to make it do pretty dang good damage per turn. Now, while the Fire Monkey does 70 damage per turn with his defender bonus, but it requires Bloons to leak to actually get that defender bonus, and on his own, he still is a pretty low 40 damage per turn. Makes Wall of Fire overall a little bit better of a defender, and a little bit better of a tower overall. Bionic Boomerang has had its damage decrease from 55 to 50. Although this is a pretty good tower for aggro, the thing about Bionic Boomerang that pushed it over the edge was how good of its burst damage it was, to the point where you could use it in pretty much every deck for anything. 220 burst for 6 was just an insane amount of burst damage that made it really easy to run in whatever deck against whatever archetype, because even in super late game situations, it would still be incredibly useful. And although that's still the case, 200 is a lot easier of a health to manage than 220, which was just that little bit extra that made Bionic Boomerang a little too much. Berserker Brew has its damage increased from 30 to 40 to make it a bit less of a liability after you've already thrown it on the field. This one doesn't matter a ton, but hey, for you boss players out there, this one might be nice. Fireball Wizard has its damage increased from 100 to 120. Fireball Wizard's targeting is just so bad and so limited to the point where Fireball needs to have pretty dang high damage to really justify its usage, considering that, again, some of its damage is also spread out over turns because it's fire damage. It now has 120 damage and now deals a solid 90 damage per turn to any balloon that it sets on fire that is over 1 delay, making Fireball Wizard a very strong option early if your opponent is playing very few balloons. Super Monkey Fan Club has had its damage increased from 30 to 35, and its damage bonus to Dart Monkey is increased from +10 to +15. This makes SMFC a lot better to actually get down, and it makes it a little easier to buff other Dart Monkeys, especially because most Dart Monkeys are not that receptive to buffs. Combining Super Monkey Fan Club with Crossbow or Sharpshooter is now a lot easier considering the buffs that both of them got, making SMFC overall a much better card. Frag Bomb Shooter has had its ammo decreased from 3 to 2, but its reload decreased from 3 to 2. Although this gets rid of a bit of the uniqueness of Frag Bomb Shooter, which is unfortunate, the fact that Frag Bomb Shooter had 9 times burst damage because it did 9 attacks in one go, made it incredibly difficult to balance, especially with ZJ, who would give it plus 225 per rad enhancement. Now with this lower amount of attack, it makes that 9 times go to 6 times, while also keeping Frag Bomb's high damage per turn due to it being a splash damage tower. Frag Bombs in testing still felt pretty good, it just didn't feel as overly dominant as it used to. Jungle's Bounty Druid has had its ammo increased from 1 to 2. Although Jungle's Bounty Druid is an insanely annoying effect for casual players, and we specifically don't really want to buff it that much because of that, the ammo buff just makes it overall a little bit better in Gwendolyn for competitive players, improving it overall because now Gwen can get like a 50 damage per turn Jungle's Bounty Druid with Heated Up. And for casuals, it doesn't really change Jungle's Bounty Druid that much, considering that casuals don't like the fact that it heals so much, not really the fact that it does damage. Thunder Druid has had its damage increased from 25 to 100, but its reload increased from 2 to 3. This results in slightly better damage per turn, but what really matters is the fact that it does so much more burst damage. Thunder Druid now has a pretty unique role for a field clear. Although it does 80 damage to everything, that 100 damage attack instantly basically means you can pick one target to do 180 damage to, which is higher than something like a Super Monkey Storm, generally making Thunder Druid a little bit more viable of an option, playing into its monkey nature a little more, and giving the ability for stuff like Adora's Salvation to have a better effect on Thunder Druid, all at the same time. Bouncing Bullet's damage has been increased from 90 to 100. Although this is a lot of damage in one shot, actually out-damaging a Super Monkey in terms of damage per turn, the actual randomness of the Bouncing Bullet is just so bad to the point where it feels like this is a pretty justified thing to do. This also makes it better with ammo for stuff like Azili's Totem, because now it does even more damage in one shot, going up to a huge 190. Balloon Impact costed a little too much, and its effect, although decent, still was not near as strong enough to justify 9 cost, so its cost has been decreased from 9 to 8 to hopefully make it a little easier to get down. The big one's damage has been increased from 140 to 160. As monkeys have been getting strong, the big one looks even more and more pathetic every single update due to its extremely low amount of damage in comparison to its huge downside and low burst damage. Now, with 160 damage, it's a little easier to run the big one and justify hitting a bunch of stuff with it. Dark Champion's Defender bonus is now always active. This basically means that when you're using defenders to manually attack stuff instead of defending, you now get the plus 10 damage bonus instead of having to wait for the defenders to actually defend. This makes stuff like ninjas a lot better with Dark Champion, as ninjas often don't always just sit there and defend only, making it a little bit more viable to use Dark Champion in these kinds of decks, while also giving it a bit more of a cool ability. Total Transformation Monkey has had its cost reduced from 12 to 10, but its damage reduced from 60 to 50. TT5 is a way to convert your weaker monkeys into stronger ones, but due to its extremely high cost, it was actually quite difficult to do that. Although the damage decrease on the actual main guy himself is pretty rough, the decreased cost makes him a lot easier to play as a last resort or a way to convert your monkeys earlier without having to sink so much money into him or being able to barely just not afford him. And that is all of the monkeys. Finally, here are the powers. Accident in the Lab has had its cost decrease from 7 to 6. Accident was just a little too expensive for what it provided, and although we tested it at 5, it generally actually became a pretty dang overpowered card in terms of, well, it was kind of like, not exactly overpowered, but pretty much every single aggro deck had to use it because it was just so good, so its cost was bumped up to 6 to make it a little bit more of a choice to use Accident, but not entirely terrible like it was at 7. Fright Knight's Gold Steel has been reduced from 4 to 2, but its cost has been decreased from 9 to 8. This makes Fright Knight a little easier to use in terms of Bloontonium because now you can get it with 8 Bloontonium instead of 9. It makes the Gold Steel less immediately game-winning, although it still is quite a powerful effect due to the 2 gold lost and 2 gold gained being a pretty huge 4 gold swing for the player that used it. Mass Detonation has its damage reduced from 120 to 100 on the main hit. Mass Det was one of those only cards in the game that followed the format, that followed the idea of, I'm a unique card, so I'm overpowered. Pretty much none of the other uniques follow that to the point where it really matters all that much, or, like, they don't really follow it at all. Most of the other uniques don't really feel like they're broken, but just unique so it's justified, whereas Mass Det felt like that. Mass Det was an insane card in any aggro mirror. Whatever player drew Mass Det first would usually win the game because Mass Det was just such a huge reversal that it was almost impossible to recover. Mass Det's damage has been reduced to make that swing a little bit less good. It's all on fire now does 10 extra damage, going from 50 damage to 60 damage on balloons that are already on fire. Generally making it a little easier to use as an anti-whatever option. Makes it pop stuff like Blooming with Amelia Shield, for example. Stylish Finish damage increase has been decreased from 30 to 20. This generally makes Stylish a little less good at completely destroying your entire push, as the reload was the big thing that really pushed Stylish Finish over from being a kind of whatever mid-card to a pretty dang strong option for finishing whatever was in front of you. With that reload, it is no longer necessary for Stylish to give such a massive damage boost. Balloon Melter's damage has been increased from 20 to 30 to make it overall a little easier to burn your opponents with it, literally by burning them. It makes Melter a little bit better in stuff like Eternal decks, and makes it a bit more of an option for finishing off the opponent in stuff like Burn decks, although I still probably wouldn't use it in dedicated Burn decks. Good for Eternal, though. Ability Ban has its cost reduced from 2 to 1, making it a little bit easier to use in aggro decks or to use as a final option against things like Adora or ZJ to deny Rad Balloon and a passive awesomeness, or versus someone like Amelia to deny a Wand over Wallet or Grand Disappearance. Economy Drain was ruling the game with decks that were known as high roll decks. High roll decks would basically try and get an economy drain, choke the opponent out of all their money, use farms to get back the income for yourself, and use huge balloons to overwhelm and kill the opponent before they could play their big monkeys or powers. Economy Drain was just so good at doing that for 2 gold that it was fitting into a ton of decks where it realistically felt like it shouldn't have been as good as it was, so its cost was increased from 2 to 3. Eerie Life Force became incredibly powerful after the change that made it +1 delay instead of stun, making it a staple in almost every single competitive control deck as a way to finish off the opponent by getting tons of Bloons in the graveyard and then finishing them off. The cost has been increased from 2 to 4, mainly to make it a lot harder to use versus aggro, as before it was a pretty competent anti-aggro option, being a 2 cost +1 delay, even though the graveyard might have given that Bloon a little bit extra health. But because control decks don't really run as many Bloons early, it generally made Eerie Life Force a pretty riskless option versus aggro, and now 4 it's a little bit harder to justify playing Eerie Life Force on an enemy Bloon for aggro. Enhanced Reflexes damage has been increased from 60 to 90. This generally makes it a little easier to use for popping whatever you need it to, now being able to pop a green or a blooming if it's not really buffed. Ghostly Armor's armor bonus has been increased from 40 to 45 to give it an even better amount of armor in one turn to allow it to block more damage than something like Spike Storm could. However, because it's a one charge, Spike Storm still has the ability to outclass this thing by doing 60 damage instead of decreasing the damage taken by 45. It just makes Ghostly Armor a little bit more of a viable option when using it for anti-aggro. Heartstopper's damage buff has been increased from 40 to 60. It makes Heartstopper do a little bit more damage to things in general, and because of the buffs to Regrow and Lead Bloons overall, it generally means that Heartstopper might just be a little bit better of an option overall. Regrow Potion's Regrow amount has been increased from 30 to 40. It just did too little Regrow before to ever justify, and even with this it still is questionable at best, but Regrow Potion is a little bit better for stuff like Moabs, for stacking it on top of it now, using its higher amount of regrow for that. Stunning Shot's cost has been decreased from 2 to 1 to make it generally a bit better of an anti-aggro or anti-tempo option for Quincy if he wants to run that. Bloon Repairbot's heal has been increased from 100 to 140. This is a pretty significant buff to the card and makes it a lot better at taking low health Bloons and healing them up to a pretty high amount of health. It's pretty good for, overall, just tempo in general, and the reason why it's such a high amount is because if Bloon Repairbot was not a high amount, just running a yellow Bloon would generally be better, as it is also a 3-cost thing that immediately puts 130 stats on the field. This now has higher stats than a Regrow Yellow, or not a Regrow Yellow, a normal Yellow, but allows, you have to damage a Bloon first to get it to happen. Bloons can't attack immediately with it, so you can't quick ready things, and it generally is a little bit more difficult to pull off, but it is a big way to surprise your opponent with a huge heal that can really mess up their plans, and it generally is a pretty strong card. Bloon Strike's damage has been increased from 50 to 60. Bloon Strike just did a little bit too little damage and made it overall pretty useless, even for the decks where you would expect it to be good, and mainly in burn decks. Desperate Defense has 5 more attack, making it a little easier to use for an actual Desperate Defense. Combined with the nerfs to stuff like Stylish Finish, this makes Desperate Defense a little bit more of an attractive option in decks compared to other buffing cards. In Our Darkest Hour has its cost decreased from 3 to 2 to make it overall a little easier to tutor whatever you need, and makes it a bit better for decks that want to grab stuff like Prince of Darkness or Marketplace. Ultra Rare Power, on the other hand, was such a similar card to In Our Darkest Hour that buffing it the same way felt kind of wrong. So instead, its cost was kept at 3, and its charges were increased from 1 to 2. Ultra Rare Power generally is considered the worst out of the two in competitive due to it having less things that you'd actually want to draw, so it having 2 charges makes it a little bit more viable in comparison to In Our Darkest Hour, which now has 2 costs to make it better to draw what it needs to draw. It separates these cards a little more and makes them a bit more interesting in comparison to each other, compared to the old version where it just kind of felt like these 2 cards were the same thing. Max Heal can now affect large Bloons and has its heal increased from 100 to 120. This makes Adora a lot better at actually, using her damaged blimps or using her damaged Bloons to kill you with Max Heal. It makes Max Heal overall a much better option in more tempo-style Adoras, which makes Adora, by proxy, a lot better since she has a new offensive option that she can kill you with that no other hero can really use. Offense Best Defense has had a better attack increase on non-defenders. This makes it overall a little less of a brick in matchups that don't have a ton of defenders that you need to really get rid of. It makes it overall a little better versus like anti-aggro that just doesn't use defenders. Pack Protection as an extra bit of shield. The thing about Pack Protection is although it's a lot of health immediately, the fact that it does not give you any health that actually hits the opponent, or any extra damage, I should probably say, makes it a lot worse in terms of viability versus something like Embiggen, which is a card that although is better than Pack Protection generally, still is a pretty poor card. So an extra shield makes it a little bit easier to use Pack Protection to protect your balloons. Parting Gift's cost has been reduced from 3 to 2. It was still too expensive and still has such a big downside that it being extremely cheap is pretty necessary for its use. Potentially you could use this with something like Bomb or the new Night Vision Sniper or Normal Sniper to get a better deal with it. Rapid Shot now is a 4 cost instead of a 3 cost. It shoots out 7 arrows instead of 5, and these arrows deal 45 damage instead of 40. This overall means that Rapid Shot deals quite a lot more damage, but costs 1 more, giving Quincy a little bit easier of a reason to run this. Instead of kind of just feeling like a worse Storm of Arrows, it now does a lot more damage than Storm of Arrows while costing a bit more, making it generally overall a bit more of an attractive option, while also making Storm of Arrows not completely outclassed. Salvation's cost has been reduced from 3 to 2. Its cost was simply just a bit too high for the effect that it provided, and now with a lower cost and stuff like Thunder Druid, Salvation should hopefully be a lot better in general. Howl's cost has been reduced from 4 to 2. Although Wolves are pretty good, the Howl was pretty much never used because its insane cost combined with the fact that it is a complete brick in something like Mountain Open just made it pretty poor. Now, with 2 costs, it's a little bit better and generally is a little bit more worth it. And no, this won't break Direwolves because Direwolves have weaknesses outside of being able to get them early. Although 18 Bloontonium is a lot to spend on 1 tower, and in terms of buffing, Howl may be outclassed by stuff like Village, which we'll talk about a little later, but Howl overall is a little easier to use for both Open and Mountain Open, and makes it generally just a bit better of a card. Quick Reload's cost has been reduced from 4 to 3. Quick Reload just costed a little too much, and 3 cost Quick Reload makes it feel like a much better burst option without making it feel too cheap. Energy Overload is also 4 to 3 cost, and it feels, and like, I'll be real with you, this card is, it's awful still. But it is at least a small bit better if you actually find a target to use it on, although this card would need a complete and total rework to ever see use and get viable. Return to Sender's cost has been increased from 4 to 5. Return to Sender is the most versatile card in the entire game, being able to remove enemy balloons, enemy monkeys, being able to use for OTK, it can be used for control, it can be used for aggro to remove stuff like Arbiter, it can be used to bounce your own monkeys back in your hand, so you can do stuff like play it with Bloom Master Alchemist twice. This card just had so many options and was so cheap to the point where it felt like this card was really strong in comparison to anything else around it. And it practically invalidated a lot of monkey removal when why would you need to do that when you have Return to Sender, which is a card that is overall more flexible than Monkey Removal, does more, and has the same basic, like, it almost does the exact same thing as Monkey Removal. There are fringe cases where Monkey Removal is better, but the thing is that Return to Sender often fulfilled a lot of these roles good enough to the point where you would just use it over it. So Return to Sender has had its cost increase from 4 to 5 to make other Monkey Removal a bit more attractive. Notably, now it costs the same as Shrink instead of costing 1 less. Bloontonium Leak has had its cost reduced from 4 to 5. Because Haunting Knight is a Bloontonium steal effect, not only getting rid of your opponent's Bloontonium but also giving it to you, Bloontonium Leak felt really bad at 5 because it not only removed the opponent's Bloontonium, but it removed your own. Now at 4, it's a little bit better used if you just generally want to get rid of the opponent's Bloontonium while being a bit of a less committal option. Orders Received has had its cost decreased from 5 to 4. Although this sounds kind of weird, especially if you're a more casual player, Orders Received, although a decent card, generally didn't fit into the types of decks that Jones wanted to play. With 4 cost, it's a little bit less committal to play this card, and it makes it generally a little better, in comparison to stuff like Field Clear, which, although a little bit more expensive, generally was more powerful than Orders Received. Lead Casing's cost has been reduced from 6 to 5, and its armor has been increased from 20 to 25. This makes Lead Casing a little bit better at protecting things overall, and stops it from being such an expensive card to where it just can't really be used. Bombs Away has had its cost decreased from 7 to 5. This means that generally Bombs Away is a bit more of a useful card for dealing with stuff like ceramics, camo regrow balloons, or stuff like rainbows, but it still is a very limited card, it doesn't hit blimps, and it's still pretty bad, but at least it's not complete garbage anymore. Red Balloon Apocalypse has had its cost increased from 8 to 9. The thing about Red Balloon Apocalypse is not only did it block storm spawns, making you a lot better at making it like way easier to survive, it not only blocked enemies from playing balloons, which again made it way easier for you to survive, but with Eerie Life Force's recent buff, Red Balloon Apocalypse also gave you 8 red balloons to put in your graveyard pool immediately, helping you scale that thing up to kill your opponent with. Because of all these strengths and how Red Balloon Apocalypse is very commonly used in Control, it got a bit of a price nerf to make it a little harder to afford Red Balloon Apocalypses and afford to block your opponents as much. And that's it for the powers. We have 2 hero changes here, and then the rest are just kind of a recount of all the other changes that they got. Quincy was the only hero that got actual ability changes. Perceptive Shot's damage has been increased from 10 to 15, and Flurry of Arrows damage has been increased from 50 to 60. Quincy overall was pretty good versus aggro, but against any other archetype he really struggled due to his defense flailing and kind of getting worse over time. Perceptive Shot and Flurry of Arrows damage increase makes it a little bit easier to survive versus stuff like Tempo, while also making his aggro matchup a little bit better. It generally makes Quincy a much better powerhouse in the types of decks he wants to run, especially those who use OTK or Tempo to go a little later than Quincy normally goes. Quincy also got 3 of his exclusive changed. Enhanced Reflexes and Stunning Shot got just flat buffs, and Rapid Shot got a rework which is mostly just a flat buff, so Quincy overall is going to feel a lot better in this patch. Gwendolyn got its All on Fire now changed and got some extra stuff like Crossbow to help her do generally better. She also got Druid. I forgot to mention Druid. Druid's pretty cool for Gwen. Use Druid and Gwen. Oben and Mountain Oben got a Zebra Balloon and also got the Howl buff. Amelia got Pack Protection, Offense Best Defense, and a bunch of aggro changes that generally benefit her. Adora got Salvation change, Max Heal change, and Energy Overload, which generally help her, while also giving her a better Zebra and Rainbow Bloom, both of which are really good for her since her sacrifice is exactly 15 Bloontonium. ZJ got a nerf on Stylish Finish, but also got a nerf on Druid of Peace, something which held back Rad OTK quite hard, meaning that ZJ overall will probably be a lot better with stuff like that and Extra Shot Balloon in his decks. Striker Jones got Orders Received buff, but also got a couple nerfs to his high roll decks. He generally will probably still be a little better, but his best decks will receive definitely some kind of nerf. Azili mainly got buffed by the zombie buffs and Heartstopper getting buffed, although she appreciates a couple other changes that are a little hard to explain. I'll have to talk about them a little later. And those are the hero changes. For the bug fixes, Ghost Monkey now properly removes Quincy Action Figure, Radar Scanner Village, and Druid of Peace, who secretly had reload values that made them unable to be removed by Ghost Monkey. Balloon Impact also no longer reloads after being affected by Whoops and Ceasefire, and is instead kept at 0 ammo properly. Again, this thing had a higher hidden reload than necessary, meaning that it would reload when ammo was removed. And that's all the bug fixes that are really important for gameplay. Here are some removed changes, and by some, I mean Village. Village initially got buffed from 20 to 25 attack, but after playtesting for a while, Village was actually doing insanely well and was dominating control decks due to it being so good with Crossbow, Frag Bombs, Sharpshooter, and Super Monkey that it really just kind of dealt with everything. It was removed just because a lot of this was incredibly powerful, and the other changes to stuff like Radar Scanner Village, Desperate Defense, those kind of attack buffs mattered a lot less when Village was such a good buffer that you would never use the other ones. So this one was removed, and even after being removed, Village Control still felt quite strong and still felt like a very worth it thing to do. So thank you, Village. You have your time in the spotlight. And thank you to everybody who's watching this video. I want to make it very clear that this update was made out of love for Bloons Card Storm and its community, and this would not have been possible without the amount of love that the community has for this game. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate if you left a like or something. Comment if you want, I don't really care that much. It's totally fine if you don't. But also, Cardstorm, not really sure if there's going to be another update after this one, but the hope with this update is that we buffed an insanely high amount of bad cards to effectively make practically new cards in the game for a kind of last hurrah update if this is the final update. If not, then I'll eventually be doing another one of these videos, but I hope that you enjoy Bloons Card Storm with all these changes, and I hope that you enjoy the free adventures and stuff like that. Thank you very much for watching.